In today's video, we're going to be talking about the top 5 cichlid tank setups for a 75-gallon aquarium. A 75-gallon tank is not only one of the most common aquarium sizes, but also one of our favorites, and there are a lot of different cichlids that you could put in a 75-gallon tank. We've had a lot of setups in a 75-gallon tank in the past, and we're going to talk about our top 5 favorites along with a couple bonus ones at the end. So guys, let's dive right in. The 75-gallon aquarium is probably one of the most common aquarium sizes that you'll find, and we get asked about this tank setup quite often. We figured we would make one video with our top 5 suggestions so that we could share this with anyone that has the question in the future. The common 75-gallon aquarium is 48 inches long or 4 feet long. It is 18 inches front to back and 21 inches tall, so it makes for a really good footprint for most cichlid tank setups. We've used our 75-gallon tanks in so many different ways in the past, from a grow-out tank to a South American setup to Central American cichlids that were a little more aggressive with more of a holding tank with just some fish thrown in it. But the list we have here today is more of a permanent setup if you have only a 75-gallon tank and you want to use it with cichlids. So I'm actually going to pass it over to my brother Alec for number 5 on the list.
Ambuna are a great choice for a 75-gallon tank. The best part about choosing Ambuna for your 75-gallon is that they will have more than enough space and will not outgrow your tank. We always say it's better to go with a bigger tank than your cichlids need, otherwise you'll just end up wanting to upgrade down the line. Ambuna are some of the smallest African cichlids, and even though there are many different kinds of Ambuna, and some can grow over 6 inches, most of them stay about 4 to 5 inches. They do well in tanks with more depth front to back like the 75-gallon has, as opposed to the thinner depth of a 55-gallon. They love heavily rock-scaped tanks to tunnel in and make territories, and the bigger footprint of the 75-gallon provides room for that. Ambuna are notoriously aggressive, so even though they can technically go in smaller tanks, going with a larger tank like a 75-gallon will go a long way towards mitigating that aggression by providing more territory.
So coming in at number 4 on our list is more of a planted tank community setup with some of your more peaceful cichlids. In a 75-gallon tank, some of the cichlids that could work really well together are the angelfish, the rams, different apistogramma, and you could also mix in some non-cichlids in that setup as well. Using some sand, driftwood, rocks, and just a variety of live plants could really make that 75-gallon tank look awesome. It also has the benefit of being a more peaceful setup, so you don't have to worry too much about aggression or fish becoming too territorial in your tank. One of the staples in the hobby is the angelfish, and they would work really well in that type of setup with a lot of live plants in a 75-gallon tank. You could even mix in a couple geophagus, or I really like the rams as an option with the angelfish, and then maybe some tetras like your Colombian tetras swimming throughout the middle and upper levels of the tank. It's a really calm, peaceful example of a cichlid tank setup that you normally wouldn't get, and that could all fit really well in a 75-gallon tank.
Peacocks fit perfectly in a 75-gallon tank. They do get a little bit bigger than Ambuna, but they also require much less rockscape than Ambuna because they're much more open water swimmers, so the size difference really evens out perfectly between the two. It really comes down to a matter of preference for the fish keeper. Some like more rocks and decor in their tank, and some like the fish to be the focal point of the tank. Peacocks are some of the prettiest freshwater fish with amazing coloration. They do best in an all-male setup with as much variety as possible. Peacocks come in just about any color and color combination that you can think of, and do well in an overstocked setup if you can keep up with the frequent water changes. They are also much less aggressive than Ambuna, so if you enjoy aquariums that put the focus more on the color of the fish than the aquascape, then peacocks may just be your best choice for a 75-gallon tank.
Coming in at number 2 on the list is a Central American cichlid tank. You have to be careful with the Central American cichlids that you pick for a 75-gallon tank because some of them get too large, like your Vieja or some of your Amphilophus species. But luckily there are some very common Central Americans that could potentially work in a 75-gallon tank even if they're on the more aggressive end. One great example of this was Quinn's 75-gallon tank in his classroom, which had a Jack Dempsey, a convict, and a firemouth. You could also occasionally throw in a Salvini cichlid, although they can be very aggressive. Nicaraguan cichlids is another Central American option that could fit in that mix, but overall if you get 4 or 5 of those more aggressive cichlids, you would not only have the beautiful color and slightly aggressive nature, but they should have enough territory in a 75-gallon tank to get along. The Salvini might be the one exception, as it can be just so aggressive. We actually had to remove it from our 75-gallon tank about a year ago. But as long as you don't have breeding pairs in that 75-gallon tank, it should work really well, and you could maybe get some bigger schooling fish to go along and complement some of those aggressive Central American cichlids. It's a really cool option. Just don't get too many and throw them all into a 75-gallon tank. You'll likely have aggression issues if they don't have enough territory. And if you're going with convicts, make sure you're either going with one male alone or females only, so that you don't have breeding and a ton of aggression at all times. And specifically with that setup, make sure you have a backup plan to be able to remove those fish, whether to give it to a friend or a local fish store, or to put it into another tank in case the aggression becomes too much, like with our Salvini. But coming in at number 1 on the list is what I probably mentioned the most on this channel, and that is a South American cichlid tank setup with Severums, Geophagus, and Electric Blue Acara. It's absolutely my favorite trio of fish to keep together, and there's a variety of reasons for that. First is that you get such a mix of coloration because there are many different types of Severums. You get that orange yellow based Severum, or your green, or your red shoulder, or your turquoise Severum. Then you can complement that with the electric blue coloration of the Electric Blue Acara. And then your Geophagus, you could go with the Geophagus topos in a 75-gallon tank. You could go with a group of them, maybe 5 to 7, to mix with 1 or 2 Severums and maybe 1 or 2 Electric Blue Acara to have a really good mix of South American cichlids. If you did a few less, maybe only a Geophagus or 2, you could maybe mix in some of your more peaceful South American cichlids like the Festivum or the Keyhole cichlid to kind of round out the cichlid community tank setup for South America. The other great thing about this trio is that the Severums are gentle giants. They have a unique body shape and they're pretty big, whereas the Electric Blue Acara obviously has that pop of blue and they swim so actively throughout the tank. And then the Geophagus will stay towards the bottom of the tank, sifting through your sand and demonstrating that really cool earth-eating behavior. That mix of coloration, body type, and behavior makes for my favorite type of cichlid tank setup, and that's why I have 2 of those in my 180 and my 150 right now. But you could basically take my tank setups and pare it down a bit with less total fish and fit that into a 75-gallon tank. The one thing I would watch out for is the total number of Severums you go with, because they do get pretty big. I would only recommend a maximum of 2 Severums in a 75-gallon tank as adults. But the rest of those fish stay small enough that you can keep them in a 75-gallon tank comfortably for the duration of their lives. Okay, so as mentioned, we actually have 2 bonus tank options, and the first one is just to have a solo fish, more of a pet fish, in a 75-gallon tank. As an example, Quinn in his classroom has a flower horn, and if you're into flower horns, that could be a really cool option to be a solo fish in a 75-gallon tank. Usually that pet fish is going to be very aggressive, and that's why they need to be kept solo, or they'll become so big that they really need the extra space just themselves. Another common question we get is a 75-gallon tank big enough for an Oscar? And really it's the bare minimum tank size, I would say, and as a full-grown Oscar, I would say you would need a bigger tank than a 75-gallon tank, but if you're going to keep it in a 75, maybe keep it on its own or with very minimal tank mates so that it has enough room in the tank to swim around. So if you're dead set on getting an Oscar and you only have a 75-gallon tank, I would just keep it solo in that tank with minimal decor. And then the last bonus option we almost had on the list was just a Tanganyikan setup. The reason it didn't quite make the setup is that some of the cichlids stay either very small or very big. We're talking about either the shell dwellers or the frontosa. There are some cichlids you can mix in there, so you could do some type of community with shell dwellers, maybe some Julia dichromis species. It's a little bit harder to find those species, but there could be a unique setup you could go with. It would be very cool to see a shell dweller tank. I have a 33-gallon here with a ton of babies, but if that was expanded to a 75-gallon footprint, it would be awesome to see that many shell dwellers throughout the tank. So that does it for our top 5 list, plus our 2 bonus options. If you have a favorite on this list or in addition to the list, leave that down in the comment section below. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next time.